It was a bright, warm afternoon in the city park, the kind of day that made people want to be outside, feeling the sun on their skin and the gentle breeze on their faces. Families were scattered across the green lawns, some enjoying picnics on colorful blankets, while children ran around laughing, chasing each other and squealing with joy. Joggers were moving steadily along the paved paths, earbuds in, lost in their own worlds, and dogs of all shapes and sizes darted around happily, sniffing every corner and wagging their tails with excitement. The park was alive with energy, a mixture of calm relaxation and lively activity, creating a perfect backdrop for what seemed like an ordinary day. In the middle of this lively scene, a woman walked confidently, her posture straight, her steps measured and calm. She was a black woman in her mid-30s, dressed casually but smartly, carrying a small bag over her shoulder, and holding the leash of her medium-sized dog. Her dog trotted beside her obediently, occasionally sniffing a patch of grass or stopping to greet a passerby. She appeared at ease, blending in with the park's regular crowd, yet there was a quiet strength in the way she moved, a sense that she was aware of her surroundings and ready to handle whatever came her way. As she walked, she noticed children playing near the fountain, their laughter echoing across the park. She smiled briefly at their innocence and energy, but her attention remained steady on the path ahead. A few elderly people sat on benches, feeding pigeons or reading newspapers, completely absorbed in their own routines. The sun reflected off the leaves, making them shimmer like tiny green flames, and the gentle rustle of the wind through the trees created a soft, comforting sound that blended with the distant hum of city life. Suddenly, two police officers appeared in the distance, walking purposefully toward her. Their presence was immediately noticeable, not just because of the uniform, but because of the way they moved, their eyes scanning the park and finally focusing on her. There was an intensity in their gaze that made her pause for a brief moment, a fleeting thought crossing her mind about why they might be approaching. She took a deep breath and continued walking, keeping her composure, trying not to show any unease. The officers moved faster now, closing the distance with an almost mechanical precision, their expressions serious and unreadable, making the atmosphere around her slightly tense. As the officers drew nearer, she became more aware of the subtle looks from other park visitors. People began noticing the interaction, their curiosity piqued by the unusual attention being directed at one person. Some stopped mid-step, others slowed down, creating a kind of invisible audience without realizing it. The woman felt the weight of their gaze but remained calm, reminding herself that she had nothing to hide and that she had the right to walk freely in the park. She glanced briefly at her dog, who seemed oblivious to the tension, tail wagging happily, and that small comfort helped her steady her nerves. The officers finally reached her, and the air seemed to change slightly, from the carefree atmosphere of a sunny afternoon to something more charged, their presence commanding attention. The park still hummed with life around them, but in that small space where she and the officers stood, a kind of quiet tension hung in the air. Her mind raced for a moment, thinking about the possible reasons they might be stopping her, but she quickly pushed the worry aside, deciding to handle the situation with calm confidence. She knew that showing fear or anger would only escalate the encounter, and she carefully prepared herself to respond politely but firmly if needed. At that moment, everything seemed to slow down. The distant laughter of children, the rustle of leaves, even the occasional bark of a dog felt muted compared to the intensity of what was about to unfold. The park, which moments ago had felt like a safe, ordinary place, now carried a new energy, a mix of curiosity, caution, and anticipation. She felt fully present, noticing every detail. The shine of the officers' badges, the subtle shift in their posture, the way their eyes held her gaze, the slight tightening of their hands near their belts. It was a moment that seemed ordinary on the surface but carried the potential to change everything in an instant. And so, in the middle of a lively, sunlit city park, with children laughing, joggers moving past, and dogs happily exploring the grass, a quiet but intense encounter was about to begin, an encounter that would not only test her composure but also reveal unexpected truths about authority, power, and awareness. The day that had started like any other was now on the brink of becoming a story that people would talk about, share, and remember, all because of a single walk through a city park. As the woman continued walking along the park path, she could feel the gaze of the two officers sharpening, an almost invisible tension threading the air between them. She had noticed police before in the park, responding to minor incidents or checking on reports, but this felt different. Their steps were synchronized and deliberate, a quiet intensity in the way they moved toward her. She kept her pace steady, dog trotting loyally beside her, and tried to appear as ordinary as anyone else. Enjoying the afternoon, yet there was a spark of unease beneath the surface, a subtle sense that something was about to happen. One of the officers finally stepped directly in front of her, slightly blocking her path. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his tone polite but firm, almost rehearsed. She paused and looked at him calmly, responding with a soft, measured voice, "Yes, officer. How can I help you?" The other officer hovered close, hands near his belt, eyes scanning her and the surroundings, his presence silent but authoritative. The woman noticed their movements, the small details that told her they were sizing her up, their attention focused entirely on her. The first officer continued, asking where she was coming from and what she was doing in the park. His questions were loaded, though framed as casual conversation, and there was a subtle edge in his voice that made it clear he wasn't just making friendly conversation. She answered politely, giving truthful, simple responses. "I'm walking my dog," she said, gesturing briefly to the dog trotting happily beside her. "We're just enjoying the park this afternoon." Her words were calm, neutral, carefully chosen, because she knew that any sudden defensiveness could make the situation worse. Despite her composure, the officers didn't seem satisfied. Their questions became slightly more pointed, asking for identification and why she was walking alone. She handed over her driver's license when requested, noticing the brief flicker of surprise on the younger officer's face as he looked at her information, yet there was still a sense of doubt in their expressions, a hesitation that told her they weren't quite sure what to make of her. Her heart remained steady, but she could feel the tension in the air, almost like a weight pressing down on the normally bright, sunny park. Around them, other park-goers began to notice the unusual interaction. Some slowed their pace to watch, while others glanced nervously from a distance, unsure if they should intervene or keep walking. The laughter of children playing seemed to fade slightly in the background, replaced by the quiet hum of curiosity and uncertainty. Even the birds, normally chirping loudly in the trees above, seemed quieter, as though the park itself had sensed the intensity of the moment. The woman observed everything carefully, the officer's posture, their hand movements, the way their eyes flicked between her and the surroundings. She realized that this was no ordinary stop, that the way she responded here would likely determine how the encounter unfolded. She reminded herself to remain calm, to answer clearly and respectfully, and to not let the tension provoke any sudden reactions. Her dog, unaware of the human complexities at play, wagged its tail, offering her a small sense of comfort amidst the unease. Minutes passed, though it felt much longer, as the officers continued to press with seemingly simple questions. Each question seemed to carry an unspoken weight, and she could feel the subtle judgment in their tone, yet she remained composed, her voice steady and polite, giving precise answers without hesitation. She also maintained eye contact, signaling that she was fully aware of her rights and her surroundings. The park around them continued to exist normally, but in this small corner, an invisible stage had formed, with the woman and the officers at its center. It was in this tense, measured exchange that the first hints of the unexpected began to take shape. She realized that this encounter, which could have remained ordinary, was quietly escalating. The officer's posture was slightly more rigid now, a subtle sign that they were reassessing the situation. Perhaps they were sensing that she was not someone easily intimidated, that she carried herself with confidence and authority, even in the face of uncertainty. At that moment, she took a deep breath, steadying herself for whatever came next, aware that the way she handled the next few moments could change everything. Around them, the park continued its sunny, lively rhythm, but for the woman, the encounter had become a test of composure, courage, and presence of mind. The initial polite questions had become a delicate dance of power and awareness, and she was preparing to respond in a way that would leave a lasting impression. Even though she had remained calm and polite during the initial questioning, the tension in the air continued to grow. The officers' polite tones had begun to shift, their questions becoming sharper, their posture more assertive. There was an unmistakable edge now, as if the earlier politeness had been a test, and they were moving on to something more serious. The woman sensed the change immediately, feeling a subtle tightening in her chest, but she refused to show any fear, keeping her steps measured and her voice steady. One of the officers leaned slightly closer, asking why she was there alone. "Ma'am, we've had reports of suspicious activity in this area. Can you explain why you're walking through the park by yourself?" he asked. His words were careful, almost rehearsed, but the meaning was clear. She was being singled out. The woman kept her gaze calm, responding with honesty, "I'm just walking my dog. It's a public park. I come here often," she said, gesturing toward the dog happily sniffing a patch of grass. Her tone was firm yet polite, a careful balance between assertiveness and respect. The other officer stepped slightly to the side, scanning the surroundings while keeping one eye on her. She noticed the subtle glances toward nearby park-goers, as if they were checking for witnesses or waiting for a sign. There were a few people passing by, their curiosity evident in stolen glances, but no one intervened, creating an invisible tension that surrounded her like a protective, yet silent, audience. Despite her cooperation, the officers continued to press, suggesting she might be concealing something or that her presence was unusual. "Do you have identification on you?" one asked, the word "on you" carrying a subtle pressure. A brief hesitation flickered through her mind, but she responded calmly, retrieving her driver's license from her bag and handing it over. She noticed the younger officer's eyes linger on her name and information, a faint look of surprise passing briefly, but it was gone almost immediately, replaced by a neutral, professional mask. The situation was escalating. Though no words of anger had been exchanged yet, the woman could feel the silent power struggle taking place. Her calm composure and firm posture were clashing with the officer's authority, creating a tense, almost electric atmosphere. It was one of those rare moments where time seemed to stretch, the seconds dragging as everyone waited for the next move. Her dog sniffed around innocently, unaware of the unspoken battle occurring just a few feet from its leash. She realized that the encounter could turn unpredictable at any moment. The officers were clearly unsure how to proceed. Their questioning was polite, yet insistent. Their hands occasionally moved closer to their belts, a subtle reminder of the power they held. She kept her breathing steady, reminding herself to respond without panic or aggression. Each word she spoke was measured, intended to convey cooperation without weakness, and confidence without provocation. Around them, the park continued in its usual rhythm, but the energy near her felt distinctly different. Children's laughter seemed softer, the joggers passed a little slower, and a few onlookers paused to watch the unusual interaction. The woman felt their eyes on her, not as a burden but as a kind of silent support. It reminded her that she was not alone, that there were people observing this moment and that her actions mattered. As the questioning continued, she noticed a slight tension between the officers themselves, subtle gestures and glances that hinted at disagreement or uncertainty. Perhaps they weren't expecting this level of calm and composure from someone they had assumed would be intimidated. Perhaps they hadn't anticipated that she would answer clearly, confidently, and without fear. She could sense that they were reassessing the situation, weighing how to handle someone who refused to react in the way they might have expected. For a brief moment, she imagined what could happen next, preparing mentally for all possibilities. She knew that remaining calm and aware was her strongest tool, and that any sudden movement, defensive gesture, or raised voice could escalate the situation unnecessarily. She shifted slightly to ensure her dog stayed close, a small anchor in the midst of mounting tension. Her mind worked quickly, considering how to assert authority and protect herself without provoking hostility. The subtle escalation continued, the polite questions carrying an unspoken weight. The woman realized that the encounter had quietly evolved from a routine stop to a delicate confrontation of power, awareness, and authority. Each person involved, the officers, herself, the observers, was now playing a role in a silent drama unfolding in the heart of a sunlit city park. What had begun as a normal afternoon walk had transformed into a test of courage, composure, and presence of mind, setting the stage for an unexpected turning point that no one could yet predict. The tension in the park had grown so thick it felt almost tangible, like a heavy curtain hanging in the warm afternoon air. The officers continued their questions, their polite tones now carrying an unmistakable edge, but the woman remained steady, her calmness unbroken. Her dog trotted obediently beside her, blissfully unaware of the quiet power struggle unfolding. The park, filled with laughter, chatter, and distant city sounds, seemed to fade into the background as all attention centered on this small, charged encounter. She realized the moment had reached a critical stage, a turning point that demanded careful action, not one to panic or react impulsively. She drew in a steady breath, centering herself. Her eyes briefly scanned the officers' faces, noticing the subtle tension in their jaws, the almost imperceptible tightening of their hands near their belts. It was clear that they were unsure how to proceed, and that uncertainty was a key advantage. She knew that this was the exact moment to assert authority. But she needed to do it calmly, without aggression, to maintain control of the situation. Slowly, deliberately, she reached into her bag, her movements measured and unhurried. Her hands brushed against the smooth surface of her CIA badge, and she pulled it out with quiet confidence. Holding it up for the officers to see, she allowed the weight of the revelation to settle into the air. "Officers," she said, her voice calm but firm, "I am authorized personnel." The words were simple, but their effect was immediate and profound. A silent declaration that shifted the balance of the encounter entirely. For a split second, everything seemed to pause, as though the park itself was holding its breath. The officers froze, their carefully controlled expressions flickering with surprise and uncertainty. The younger officers' eyes widened slightly, while the senior officers' stance softened, their aggressive posture giving way to caution. The polite questions, the probing gestures, the quiet authority. They were all suddenly rendered secondary in the face of her revelation. The atmosphere changed. From tension to astonishment, and a new kind of respect began to replace the initial hostility. Passers-by who had been watching curiously now stopped in their tracks, their eyes widening at the unexpected turn of events. Whispers spread among those nearby, subtle murmurs of surprise and admiration. The laughter of children and the distant hum of the city slowly returned to the scene, but it now carried a sense of cautious awe, as though the park itself recognized the extraordinary moment unfolding. The woman's calmness and authority had transformed the encounter into something remarkable. A vivid lesson in composure and presence of mind. The officers, previously confident and assertive, now hesitated, clearly reconsidering their approach. Their movements became more tentative, their voices softer, almost careful, as if testing the waters to see how far they could push without crossing a line. The woman maintained her calm, holding the badge slightly in front of her, her gaze steady and unwavering. She did not need to shout, threaten, or assert dominance aggressively. Her quiet confidence spoke volumes, projecting control and authority far more effectively than words alone could achieve. In that moment, the ordinary park had become a stage for an extraordinary display of awareness and self-assuredness. The woman's calm, deliberate action had shifted the power dynamic entirely, demonstrating how knowledge, composure, and presence of mind could change the course of a tense encounter. It was a turning point not just for the interaction itself, but also for everyone observing, the officers, the parkgoers, even the dog, who wagged its tail, sensing that its owner was fully in control. She slowly lowered the badge, maintaining her calm demeanor, letting the officers process the revelation fully. There was no gloating, no unnecessary flair, just quiet, undeniable authority. The officers' faces reflected the sudden awareness that the situation had escalated far beyond what they had anticipated. Their hesitancy was palpable, the previous confidence replaced by careful consideration. Every second of pause reinforced the lesson. Calm, knowledge, and composure could shift the balance of power in moments of uncertainty. As the encounter lingered in that tense yet respectful space, the woman felt a sense of quiet victory, not through confrontation, but through clarity and self-assurance. The park, once a simple backdrop for a routine walk, had become the setting for a dramatic turning point, a moment that would be remembered and shared, a story of courage and composure in the face of authority. The ordinary had become extraordinary, and she had done it without raising her voice or losing her calm, proving that true power often lies in restraint, knowledge, and unwavering confidence. The moment the woman revealed her CIA badge, the air seemed to shift. The invisible tension that had been tightening like a coil suddenly changed its rhythm. The two officers froze, their confident and assertive demeanor replaced by a subtle uncertainty. For the first time in the encounter, they were unsure how to act. Their hands, once lightly resting near their belts, hesitated, fingers lingering uncertainly. Eyes darting between her face and the badge she held. It was a pause loaded with questions, unspoken judgments, and a dawning realization that this was no ordinary situation. The younger officer was the first to break the silence, his voice quieter than before, tinged with hesitation. "Ma'am, we didn't realize," His words trailed off as he struggled to find the proper way to respond. The senior officer's posture softened slightly, shoulders no longer squared aggressively, but still tense enough to show that he had yet to fully process what had just occurred. The woman noticed every micro-expression, every subtle shift in their body language, and she remained perfectly composed, holding the badge steadily, her calmness almost a physical presence in the space between them. Around them, the park continued its usual rhythm, but the focus had narrowed, as if the world had shrunk to the few feet between the woman and the officers. Joggers slowed slightly, curious onlookers paused, and even children playing nearby seemed momentarily distracted by the silent intensity of the scene. The ordinary sounds of the park, birds chirping, leaves rustling, distant laughter, felt muted. Replaced by the quiet hum of anticipation, the officers were now fully aware that their authority was being challenged not with aggression, but with intelligence and composure. The woman, sensing the hesitation, did not rush or speak unnecessarily. Instead, she allowed the moment to stretch, letting her calm, measured presence communicate a subtle but firm message. She was fully aware of her rights and the consequences of the interaction. The younger officer shifted uneasily, glancing at his partner as if seeking guidance, yet the senior officer remained silent, caught in a moment of internal debate, clearly weighing the situation carefully before taking any further action. This was no longer a simple stop or routine questioning. It had evolved into a delicate dance of respect, caution, and authority. She could feel the mental calculations occurring on the officers' faces, their hesitation growing with each passing second. The longer the pause lasted, the more it became evident that her calm, deliberate action had completely unsettled their assumptions. Their previous confidence, born from training and the expectation of compliance, was now replaced by a cautious respect. An invisible line had been drawn, and she was clearly standing on the side that held power in this interaction, not through threat, not through anger, but through quiet self-assurance, awareness, and the simple act of presenting her credentials. The dog at her side wagged its tail, oblivious to the tension but adding a subtle reminder that she was grounded and unshaken. She noticed a few onlookers nearby, who whispered softly among themselves, marveling at the transformation of a tense confrontation into a remarkable display of composure. Their curious gazes served as a reminder that she was not alone, that the world outside this small standoff was watching, and that her actions carried weight far beyond the immediate situation. Finally, the senior officer spoke, his voice measured, careful, and devoid of the previous edge. "All right, ma'am, thank you for your cooperation," he said. A brief pause followed as they stepped back slightly, creating physical space, signaling their acknowledgement of her authority in this encounter. The younger officer mirrored the movement, both clearly recalibrating their approach. Their hesitation was no longer fear, but a cautious respect, an understanding that this situation required thoughtfulness rather than immediate action. In that quiet moment, the woman felt a sense of control, not through confrontation, but through presence, knowledge, and restraint. She had managed to de-escalate a potentially volatile situation simply by maintaining composure and asserting authority in a calm, confident manner. The officer's hesitation became a lesson in itself, a reminder that authority can be challenged without conflict, and that the balance of power can shift dramatically when intelligence and calmness are applied. As the officers continued to pause, considering their next move, the park slowly returned to its familiar rhythm. The laughter of children returned, joggers resumed their pace, and birds chirped more confidently in the trees, yet the moment remained imprinted in the space between them, a quiet but powerful testament to the impact of courage, awareness, and self-assurance. It was a pause that spoke volumes, a turning point where hesitation replaced hostility, and respect quietly emerged from tension. The hesitation of the officers lasted only a few moments, but in those moments, the balance of the encounter had completely shifted. The woman, holding her CIA badge confidently, remained calm, her posture steady, and her gaze unwavering. She could feel the subtle change in energy as the officers processed the reality that they were no longer in control. Their previous assumptions, built on routine stops and expectations of compliance, were now being replaced by careful consideration and respect. Finally, the senior officer took a step back and nodded slightly, a gesture that acknowledged the authority and composure the woman had displayed. "You're free to continue, ma'am," he said, his voice measured and careful, stripped of the tension that had dominated the earlier exchange. The younger officer mirrored the movement, both officers retreating slightly, giving her physical and symbolic space to regain her ordinary presence in the park. The woman, without haste or sudden movements, relaxed her posture, signaling that she understood the resolution, but that she would not forget the weight of the encounter. As she gathered her bag and adjusted the leash of her dog, a sense of calm returned to her, though tinged with the awareness of how quickly situations like this could escalate. She walked forward slowly, maintaining her composure, every step deliberate and unhurried. A few passers-by who had stopped to observe whispered quietly among themselves, their astonishment and admiration clear in their eyes. The ordinary afternoon in the park had been transformed into a subtle but unforgettable lesson in awareness, courage, and composure. The dog trotted happily beside her, seemingly oblivious to the tension that had just dissolved, and that small, innocent presence offered a sense of normalcy amid the heightened awareness of authority. She reminded herself to stay grounded, knowing that the lessons of the encounter extended beyond the few minutes of confrontation. This was not just about a walk in the park, it was about understanding power, authority, and the ways in which calmness and preparation could transform potentially volatile situations. As the officers moved away, their steps slower, more deliberate, the woman noticed a brief exchange of words between them, quiet enough that she could not hear, yet visible in their subtle gestures and nods. It was clear they were processing what had just happened, reflecting on the unexpected display of confidence, authority, and knowledge that they had encountered. She realized that her calm demeanor had not only protected her but had also subtly taught a lesson about respect, awareness, and professionalism. Walking further along the path, she began to feel the weight of the onlookers' eyes lighten. The park's usual sounds, the laughter of children, the chatter of joggers, the rustling of leaves, returned fully, restoring the ordinary rhythm of the day. Yet the memory of the officer's hesitation lingered in her mind, a reminder of the delicate balance of authority and respect. She felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, not from confrontation, but from having maintained composure and control in a situation that could have easily turned tense or threatening. Her mind reflected on the subtle dynamics of the encounter, the way a few seconds of hesitation had demonstrated the power of calmness, awareness, and presence. She knew that many people might never understand the internal calculation, the careful observation, and the self-assuredness required to navigate the situation successfully, but for her, it was a reaffirmation of the importance of knowing one's rights, maintaining composure, and asserting authority thoughtfully when necessary. By the time she reached the far end of the park, a sense of quiet closure had settled over her. The officers were still visible in the distance, no longer tense or watchful, but quietly returning to their routine patrol. She glanced back for a moment, acknowledging that the encounter had ended peacefully, yet with an unmistakable impression left on everyone involved. It was a resolution not marked by loud apologies or dramatic confrontations, but by mutual recognition of boundaries, authority, and respect. As she resumed her normal pace, the dog happily sniffing the grass beside her, she felt a sense of clarity and calm that only comes from navigating a potentially difficult situation successfully. The afternoon sun continued to shine, the park returning to its familiar rhythm, yet the quiet strength she carried with her had subtly changed the course of events, turning what could have been an ordinary walk into a remarkable story of composure, courage, and quiet authority. The encounter in the park didn't end when the woman walked away. Its echoes lingered, spreading quietly yet powerfully through the lives of everyone who had witnessed it. The officers, still processing the moment, returned to their patrol with a mixture of relief, confusion, and reflection. Their previous confidence had been tempered by the realization that authority alone does not guarantee control, and that composure, knowledge, and presence of mind can shift the dynamics of any situation. They walked a few steps behind, occasionally glancing back, as if trying to make sense of how a routine stop had been transformed into a subtle but unmistakable lesson in respect. Meanwhile, the woman continued her walk, the leash of her dog steady in her hand. She could feel the quiet stares of onlookers who had witnessed the moment of hesitation, some whispering to one another, others simply shaking their heads in disbelief or admiration. Social media, always alert to moments of tension and drama, began to buzz as onlookers took out their phones to capture what had happened, recording videos, posting brief accounts, and sharing their observations. The story began to spread almost immediately, the park encounter becoming a small but viral lesson in authority, composure, and dignity. For the woman, the aftermath was more than just public attention. It was a time of reflection, a realization that every interaction with authority carried weight, and that preparation, knowledge, and calm confidence could prevent escalation. She thought about the officer's hesitation, about the subtle shift in power, and about the ways that a single, composed action could change the outcome of what might have been a tense or even dangerous confrontation. It reinforced for her the importance of self-awareness and careful planning, even in situations that might seem ordinary at first glance. The officers, too, had their own reflections, quietly discussing the encounter among themselves, analyzing how a routine stop had taken an unexpected turn. Their confidence had been challenged not through aggression or confrontation, but through calm authority, and that realization left a subtle mark on their perspective. They understood that moments of hesitation could indicate respect, awareness, and professional knowledge, not necessarily defiance, and that such moments demanded thoughtful response rather than immediate action. It was a quiet but important lesson in humility, awareness, and adaptability. In the wider community, the story began to circulate as an example of how awareness and preparation can change interactions with authority. People shared it online, discussing racial profiling, civil rights, and the ways in which calmness and self-assurance can protect individuals in tense situations. The park incident became more than a moment of confrontation. It became a case study in composure, presence, and the unexpected power of knowledge, sparking conversations about fairness, respect, and accountability. For those who had witnessed the event firsthand, the encounter left a lasting impression. The brief moments of hesitation by the officers, the calm confidence of the woman, and the ordinary yet charged setting of the park created a story that felt both real and extraordinary. People spoke about it later, recounting details of the body language, the quiet authority, and the subtle tension that had transformed a normal afternoon into a memorable and meaningful event. Even the dog, now happily exploring the grass, seemed to carry a sense of calm, as though the tension in the air had completely lifted. For the woman, it was a reminder that strength does not always need to be loud or confrontational. Sometimes, quiet authority, preparation, and composure are enough to change the course of events. The encounter would stay with her as a powerful example of how to navigate authority, how to assert oneself, and how courage and presence of mind can influence outcomes in ways that are both subtle and profound. By the end of the day, the park had returned to its normal rhythm, laughter and chatter filling the air, joggers moving along their paths, and families enjoying the sunshine, but the memory of the encounter remained alive, etched into the minds of witnesses and shared widely across social media, a reminder of how ordinary spaces can become stages for extraordinary displays of awareness, dignity, and quiet courage. The aftermath of that day became more than a story. It became a testament to the power of composure and knowledge in the face of authority, a story that would continue to resonate and inspire. As the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the park in warm golden hues, the woman walked along the familiar paths with her dog trotting happily beside her. She felt a quiet sense of closure, yet the events of the afternoon lingered in her mind like a vivid memory that refused to fade. What had started as an ordinary walk through a city park had transformed into a profound lesson in composure, authority, and awareness, a lesson that went far beyond the immediate encounter with the police officers and extended into life itself. Reflecting on the incident, she realized that moments of tension often reveal much more than words alone can express. The hesitation she had seen in the officers' eyes, the subtle shifts in their posture, and the temporary pause in their actions had shown her how influence and authority can be wielded without aggression. That quiet, controlled presence, the calm that she had maintained, had become her most powerful tool, allowing her to navigate a potentially volatile situation safely and effectively. She understood that strength was not always loud. Sometimes it was subtle, deliberate, and rooted in knowledge and preparation. She thought about the broader implications of the encounter, about how many people face similar situations every day, often without the tools, awareness, or confidence to handle them successfully. The incident highlighted the importance of knowing one's rights, understanding authority, and maintaining composure even under pressure. These lessons were not only practical but deeply human, revealing the ways in which courage, patience, and presence of mind could shape outcomes in moments where tension and uncertainty dominate. The woman also reflected on the officers themselves, imagining the thoughts that might have run through their minds after the encounter. She realized that their hesitation was not weakness but a moment of learning, a brief but meaningful experience that could influence the way they approached future interactions. The pause had created space for reflection, understanding, and acknowledgement of the limits of authority. When faced with composure and professionalism, she felt a sense of quiet satisfaction knowing that the encounter had not only protected her but had also left a subtle, lasting impression on those she faced. As she walked further, she considered the role of the park, the ordinary setting that had become the stage for this extraordinary moment. The green lawns, rustling trees, and distant laughter had contrasted sharply with the tension of the encounter, yet they had also provided a backdrop that emphasized the calm strength she displayed. Ordinary places, she realized, can hold extraordinary moments, moments where awareness, courage, and self-assurance have the power to change outcomes and challenge assumptions. Her thoughts turned to the broader community, to the witnesses who had observed the event, and to the conversations that would follow online and offline. The incident had sparked discussion about racial profiling, civil rights, and personal authority. Becoming more than a single encounter, it had become a story, a lesson, and a reminder of the importance of awareness and preparation. She understood that sharing such experiences could inspire others to navigate difficult situations with calm, knowledge, and confidence, creating ripple effects far beyond the moment itself. Finally, she reflected on herself and what she had learned personally. The encounter had reinforced her belief in the power of composure, the importance of staying grounded, and the impact of quiet authority. She realized that courage is not always about confrontation, and power is not always about aggression. True strength, she understood, comes from presence of mind, self-awareness, and the ability to remain calm and focused in the face of uncertainty. These lessons would guide her in every future interaction, large or small, ordinary or extraordinary. As the park returned fully to its ordinary rhythm, children laughing and dogs barking, she felt a sense of gratitude for the experience, for the reminder that life often tests us in subtle ways, and for the knowledge that awareness, preparation, and calmness can transform moments of tension into moments of learning and growth. The incident had ended, but its lessons remained, etched into her mind as a reminder that courage and composure are always within reach, and that even a simple walk through a park can become a powerful story of resilience, wisdom, and quiet strength. In the golden light of the evening, she walked on, feeling stronger, wiser, and more aware, ready to face whatever life might place in her path, carrying with her the invaluable lesson that true power lies in calm confidence, thoughtful action, and the unwavering belief in one's own ability to navigate the challenges of the world with dignity, poise, and courage.